What's going on, everybody? Josh Engleman for Awesemo.com, and I am back with my NFL Top 5 on FanDuel for Week 3 in the NFL. Now be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Follow me on Twitter, at Josh Engleman. Only place you'll get updates to these sim results as we get closer to lock. Let me know in the comments section who some of your favorite and least favorite plays for this week are going to be. And finally, shout out to No House Advantage, the presenting sponsor of this video. Use the promo code Awesemo when signing up. Get yourself a little bit of extra cash on that first deposit. You guys can see my ranking for defenses on the screen right now. The Buffalo Bills coming in number 1. Now we move along to the tight ends. Tight end looking very interesting on FanDuel this week. About 75% of the odds to be in the optimal are made up in the top 4 guys. So it's pretty flat at the bottom. Logan Thomas, Jared Cook, Gronk, Noah Fant, Kyle Pitts. They all round out the bottom of the top 10. But we take a bit of a jump up in tier to get to number 5. And then we keep jumping the whole way up. At number 5, we've got Mark Andrews. He's 6K, projected for 10 fantasy points. Pretty sizable favorite with Baltimore going up against the worst defense via PFF. That would be the Lions. No chance to go for north of 25 for Andrews. You're going to need a lot of touchdowns for that bad boy. But a 9% likelihood of being in the optimal lineup. He's the highest ranked guy that is in single digits. But now we start to take those leaps. He's the number 1 guy on DraftKings, but here just number 4. 5,500, projected for 9.5 fantasy points. He was a bust last week, but we're going to Tyler Higbee. It's a very difficult matchup going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're the number 2 defense via PFF, but at this price tag, you're still getting a nice value option in a game with a total of 55.5 fantasy points. 12% likelihood that Tyler Higbee can be in the optimal lineup on FanDuel. That looks pretty good to me, but we're going to get a couple that are a lot better. TJ Hawkinson is in at number 3. He's looking pretty similar to Tyler Higbee, 6,300, projected for 11 fantasy points. A nice matchup against Baltimore. It seems weird, but this is a 50-point game total, and the Ravens defense is 16th at PFF. They are completely in the middle of the pack. They're not the same Ravens defense that you're used to. He's not going for the big 25-point game, but a 14% likelihood of being in the optimal lineup. That's enough to get to the number 3 spot at tight end this week. Now we're in a different tier. 19% likelihood of being in the optimal for Travis Kelce. He is 8,500, but well worth the price. About 16 fantasy point projection, a matchup with the Chargers, a game total of 54.5, the 27th ranked defense at PFF. That is fantastic. And obviously, Kansas City's offense is great. Kelce looks incredible here. I love the price tag. A 13% chance to go for north of 25 fantasy points. 19% for the optimal. There's huge upside, and if it starts to hit, you're going to need him. I really like getting to Kelce, but he's not my number 1 tight end. That number 1 tight end will be Darren Waller. 7,400. That price is fantastic. About 15-point projection. That's not too shabby, especially considering that price tag. Great matchup against Miami. It's only a 44-point game total, but at the same time, this is the number 22 defense at PFF, so the matchup looks fine. 8% likelihood to go for north of 25 fantasy points. But the real kicker, and honestly, this is not solely, but largely because of that $7,400 price tag. Waller is in the optimal lineup 27% of the time. That's outpacing Travis Kelce. That almost doubles TJ Hawkinson in the 3rd spot. Unequivocally, number 1 guy today. Number 1 guy on Sunday, too. This isn't going to change. It's Darren Waller. Wide receiver is pretty flat from top to bottom. We've got Tyler Lockett, Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, A.J. Brown, and Stephon Diggs rounding out the bottom of the top 10. That is loaded. Good luck trying to pick one of those wide receivers out of the others. They're all fantastic high-end options, but there are 5 guys better than them. We start in Minnesota with Justin Jefferson, 7,400, projected for 14 fantasy points. Big time total on this game. Minnesota and Seattle, 55 points. Seattle's defense, middle of the pack, as projected by PFF, 15th. Almost a 9% chance to go for north of 25 fantasy points. That would be very nice. A 15% likelihood of simply being in the optimal lineup. Justin Jefferson, because of his price tag, has enough to outpace Diggs and Brown and Godwin, Allen, Lockett. Justin Jefferson at 5 looks really good. We can stay in the same game, but we can switch sidelines and go to DK Metcalf at 7,200. Projected for almost 15 fantasy points. Gets the opposite side of the matchup. Gets to take on Minnesota, 19th ranked defense. That same 55-point game total. We know the ceiling that Metcalf has. 8% likelihood to go for north of 25. 16% chance to just be in the optimal. Does it take a lot for me to pitch rostering DK Metcalf, particularly in GPPs? It probably shouldn't. Speaking of high upside plays, number 3, Tyreek Hill, 8,700, projected for 16.5, but you know that he can go for the big boys. 54.5 point game total. Great matchup. We've already talked about Kelsey. 27th ranked defense for the Chargers. But this is why you roster Tyreek Hill. Because 17% of the time he goes for north of 25 fantasy points and you have to have him. 16% of the time he is in the optimal lineup. Wide receiver is absolutely loaded this week, but there are only 2 options better than Tyreek Hill, and they are both on the same team. The first guy we need to talk about is Robert Woods. He's 6,100, projected for 13.4 fantasy points, and he's taking on a very difficult Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, but there's going to be a ton of offense, or at least it seems like there will be, because it's got a 55.5 point game total. You're not rostering Woods for the super duper upside. You're rostering him for the price. 4.5% chance to go for north of 25, but an 18% chance of simply being in the optimal lineup. And Woods is getting a bit less ownership than Cooper Kupp, which makes him very interesting in GPPs. But either way, Woods is a steal at 6,100. But it wasn't enough to get him into the number 1 spot. That will be his teammate Cooper Kupp, 7,900, projected for 16.7 fantasy points. That same matchup against the Bucs, which looks difficult from a play-by-play basis, but not from a grand total perspective. Kupp should be very involved here. 15% chance to go for north of 25 fantasy points. 20% chance to just simply be in the optimal. Cooper Kupp is the number 1 option this week, and likely the first wide receiver you're putting into a cash lineup. Running back is looking pretty similar to wide receiver, pretty flat. Darrell Henderson, Chris Carson, Mike Davis, James Robinson, and Derrick Henry round out the bottom of the top 10. But we're not taking big leaps through the top 5, and we've got a tie at the top. At number 5, we have Austin Eckler. He's 7K, projected for almost 15 fantasy points. Taking on that Kansas City team that doesn't really have a great defense, 21st via PFF. Huge total, 54.5 points. Eckler has some ceiling in him, 7% chance to go for north of 25. He's got a floor as well, 15% chance to simply be in the optimal. I love getting to Eckler. This is a fantastic game script. He's going to be involved in the passing game if they're behind, and they are 7-point underdogs. What's not to like for Eckler? Coming in number 4, he might be my favorite GPP play of the week. It's Antonio Gibson, $6,100 price tag, 13.5 point fantasy projection. Taking on a difficult Buffalo Bills defense. They are the number 8 defense at PFF, but the football team is a 7-point dog, 45.5 point game total, but I think Gibson's just involved no matter what. He has a bit of a ceiling, 5% chance to go for 25 or more, but a 17% likelihood to be in the optimal. The price tag looks really good here, and if Washington keeps it close, Gibson's involved even more. Normally more of a DK play than a FanDuel play, but Kamara's showing up at number 3, 8K, 17-point fantasy projection, and a nice matchup against the New England Patriots, who rank 20th in defense. Now, the Saints have not been the best offense. It's only a 42-point game total. That is very low, but it should be competitive the whole way, and it's not like Kamara can get game scripted out of it. 15% of the time, he's going for north of 25 because he has the opportunity to hang just a ton of receptions. 17% chance to just be in the optimal. 8K looks good. This price tag in this game is enough to get Alvin Kamara to 3rd, but he couldn't break into the 2-way tie we've got at the top. We'll start with Joe Mixon at 6,700, projected for 15 fantasy points in a difficult matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, which ranks 3rd. Cincinnati should be competitive here, though. 3-point underdogs, 43-point total isn't the best, but it's not like Joe Mixon is going to be leaving the field. 10% of the time he goes for north of 25, a 20% chance that he is in the optimal. Joe Mixon at 6,700 is probably $300 or $400 underpriced, and that's why we're seeing him get to that number 1 spot, or at least a tie for that spot. Because paying up to $9,500 for the ceiling of Dalvin Cook looks really good. He's projected for 20 fantasy points. There's a 55-point game total in this Minnesota-Seattle matchup, and the Seahawks defense is middle of the road. 32% of the time, Dalvin Cook hangs a ceiling number, north of 25 fantasy points. 20% of the time, he's simply in the optimal. Makes it a little harder. You need a lot out of Cook given the price tag, but how many guys in the league would you want to take over Dalvin Cook in this spot? The answer might literally be 0. Before we get to those quarterbacks, one last reminder to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Then head on over to Twitter and follow me at Josh Engleman. Only place you get updates to my sim results as we get closer to lock. shout out to No House Advantage for being the presenting sponsor of this video. Don't forget to use that promo code Awesemo when signing up. Now we round out the bottom of my quarterback spot with Ryan Tannehill, Matt Stafford, Tom Brady, Daniel Jones, and Russell Wilson. We've got one more at number 5 that is pedestrian at best. And then we take a pretty good jump up. The top 4 looking great on FanDuel. At 5, we've got Justin Herbert, 7,500, projected for 21. A really nice matchup against Kansas City where you expect the Chargers to throw and throw and throw. If he can avoid the interceptions, there's going to be some touchdowns to be had. 16% chance to go for north of 25, but if you're looking for a stack, pairing him up with Keenan Allen seems like it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. Now we take the jump up in tier to $8,700 Pat Mahomes. Same game, same matchup, better defensive matchup because the Chargers ranked 27th overall. Clearly, I don't have to explain Pat Mahomes all that much. There's a 50% chance he goes for north of 25 fantasy points. Yeah, that's true. 50%. Coin flip that it happens. 12% likelihood that he's just in the optimal altogether. You got to pay up. It's going to be a heavy price tag. Clearly, pairing him with Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce is going to bring you a pretty high ceiling in points. But you're going to need it given their price tags. If it's not Mahomes for you, you can switch it up to Kyler Murray. Same odds of being in the optimal. 9K, projected for 25.5. Goes for north of 25 more frequently than Pat Mahomes. And gets a matchup against the 30th ranked defense in the Jacksonville Jaguars. If Murray can get into the end zone on his own, like on the ground, he can put up a really big day. It's possible that they also just spread it out because Jacksonville isn't very good. But a 12% chance for Kyler Murray to be in the optimal gets him to the number 3 spot. I expected this guy to be number 1, but Josh Allen is in the 2 spot. 8K, 23.8 fantasy point projection, taking on the Washington football team. Not the biggest total in the world, it's just 45.5. Washington's defense is a little bit above average. They're 12th overall, but the Bills, 7-point favorites here. 40% chance for Allen to go for north of 25 fantasy points, but a 14% chance of being in the optimal because he's just cheap enough to get to at 8K. The ceiling is there. Honestly, the floor is there. The chances of him going for less than 10 fantasy points are 0, barring injury. That's the only way it's happening. The floor is just too high for Josh Allen, and that's why he's my number 2. But $8,400 Lamar Jackson is the number 1 contender this week. 25.5 point fantasy projection. But does it get any better than the dead last Detroit Lions defense? Plus a 50-point game total, and they're 7.5 point favorites. Every single thing that you could want out of Lamar Jackson this week, he's got. The price is fine, the game script is great, and he's got the best matchup that you can find in the NFL. 51.5% chance to go for north of 25 fantasy points, and a 16% likelihood to be in the optimal is enough to put Lamar Jackson at the number 1 spot at quarterback. Alrighty, folks, that will do it. Those are my NFL DFS top 5s on FanDuel for week 3 in the NFL. Again, hit that like button because it helps me out tremendously. There's a DraftKings version of this video around here somewhere. I'll have updates for you in the early part of the morning on Sunday, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Good luck this Sunday. Win some money. I'll talk to you guys again next Friday for another edition of the Top 5.